there. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Friday morning when we are now together again for the new episode of Foundations, where you and I are working to lay a foundation of faith as we grow together, as we encourage each other, as we walk with Christ together, so that we can be the salt and light in the world around us, letting them know that although there are many things that trouble their heart and soul, there is one person who can handle all of that, beginning at the forgiveness of sins and then continuing to work in their life to build on that foundation of Christ. So, welcome to Foundations. Glad to have you with me this morning. Hopefully today we'll be able to finish up what we started last week, talking about God's work in our life upstream. Glad to have you with me this morning and joining me here on Foundations. I apologize this morning. Last week I had a throat lozenge in. This morning I've got a sinus stuff, so I might sound just a little bit nasally. It's crazy, this change of weather, I guess. You know, hot to cold and now cold to hot here over the weekend. So those of you who are like I am, who love the weather changes and all the sinus ups and downs that come with them, welcome to the Midwest and the summer weather we have. So there we go. So let's jump in for today's question. Today is the toughest question I've asked in a long time. Maybe the toughest question I've ever asked you. And so make sure you let your mind settle in just a minute, and then get ready to think. And then when you think, get ready to answer. You ready? Are you ready? Okay, here we go. When you eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, what flavor of jelly do you like best on your PBJ? What flavor of jelly do you like best on your PBJ? Now, that's the tough part of the question, but the tougher part of the question is that flavor different than the flavor you normally like on toast? Wow, I told you this was a tough one. Yeah, what's your favorite jelly to go with your PBJ? And then is it the same as the one you use on your toast? Comment down below, let me know that. You're saying to yourself, Bill, that's a stupid question. That's why you're going to put a stupid answer down below, right? You're going to comment down below. So for me, my favorite are berry preserves. Any berry preserve, strawberry, blackberry, blueberry, raspberry preserves on toast. But I do not want preserves when I eat PB&J. I want a jelly, and most often I want grape. There you go, folks. Now you know the inner workings of my little bitty brain, and now you think to yourself, why am I even listening to this guy talk? That's right. You're wondering about yourself right now, thinking, oh my lands, I can't believe I listen to this guy on a weekly basis. So there we go, folks. So PB&J, who in the world are you as far as the PB&J world? Do you like grape or do you like preserves, or what do you like on your PB&J? And then is it different than your toast? All right, let's jump in, specifically talking about where's God. Last week I began with talking about how tough it is sometimes when we think that God has forgotten us, that God has really not paid attention, and that he really should be paying more attention to the struggles we have. And we specifically look at the lives of the Israelites last week as they'd left Egypt and they were traveling to the Promised Land. And just before they traveled into the Promised Land, the Israelites were getting ready to cross over, and they were crossing over into the Promised Land, had to go across the River Jordan. And we talked about a few items, so let me cover those items again before we jump into today's. The Israelites basically wandered and they wondered. They really struggled with disbelief and disobedience. It's obvious because they spent extra years in the wilderness, because of the fact that they did not listen to God say, yes, you are going to be free, and no, you will not have any other gods. Secondly, we talked about the fact that during this time of the year, the Jordan River was in the deepest season. In other words, there were lots of rains, and the water was usually deeper, and the water was usually faster. And they had this situation where they were going to have to cross the river at its worst time to cross. We know that Joshua is now the leader and that he had replaced Moses. And then we have to wonder, as Joshua said, let's cross this thing, if these Israelites didn't question their leader and the timing he had chosen to cross this river. Now, what's interesting is this. We talked about last week, and it's very interesting to bring up again, and that is the water didn't part until the first priest stepped in. In other words, there was no indication whatsoever that water was going to be able to be traversable. And then when the priest put their foot and their toe in the water, immediately the water opened. So that's pretty interesting if you think about it. But what's even more interesting is if you look at the passage, the water actually was upstream at the place called Adam. Go look at it. It's found in Joshua, where we were at last week. Joshua chapter 3. I'm sorry, I apologize. I was looking back there. So Joshua chapter 3, go back and look at that. The water stopped upstream where they could not see God's intervention. They had to trust that God was going to intervene, that they could walk across the Jordan River. Something else to think about in it, and before we kick in, listen to this from a gentleman by the name of Rainier Rilke. Do not believe that he who seeks to comfort you lives untroubled among the simple and quiet words that sometimes do you good. His life has as much difficulty and sadness and remains far behind yours. Were it otherwise, he would never have been able to find those words. In other words, he's talking about guys like C.S. Lewis who said, grief is horrible, and go to God, and you find this locking of the door and this slamming it feels like. And I talked about last week. Go back and look at last week's. You can find that on our YouTube page. You can find it on Gilead.org, mygilead.org for that as well. But basically, what he's saying is that if you think the people who are telling you right now, like me, are telling you that you need to just do this or that because you'll get through things, we do not speak from a place where we just have knowledge, like we read something. But many of us who share and try to encourage others have faced difficulties ourselves. And we tell you from our experience, and we also admit our weaknesses when it comes time to face all of the struggles that you and I face in life. And so where is God when you and I need help? Where is God? And so that's what we've been talking about, that God is at work upstream oftentimes in places you can't see, and you need to just trust him. So picking up in Joshua chapter 3, begin reading there, it says, early the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left Achaia Grove and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River, where they camped before crossing. 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, move out from your positions and follow them. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks, found in Joshua chapter 3. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away at a town called Adam, which is near Zarethan, and the water below that point flowed on to the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. So God is at work in your life and in my life. His providence, his provisions are there, which brings me to the key behind the true heart of God. And that is that for you and I, God truly intends to provide for us. If you go to the New Testament and the disciples were getting ready to cross over in a place when Jesus was not going with them, he said, you get in a boat and you go over and I will meet you on the other side. And in the process of that, they end up with a storm and they get afraid and they think to themselves, oh my goodness, we're going to die. And so Jesus comes walking on the water and he calms the sea. Now, the reason I tell you that story is this. Jesus made a comment or a statement, basically, a truth before they got in the boat. And that is, I will see you on the other side. But halfway across, when the storm began, they began to question whether they were ever going to see him again. As a matter of fact, I doubt very seriously any of them said, well, Jesus said we're going to the other side, and now we perish, look at that liar. No, as a matter of fact, their circumstances were so tumultuous, and their minds most likely was all focused on the things around them, including the sea and the waves and all the problems, that most likely they thought to themselves, we're not going to live till tomorrow. You know, you and I oftentimes forget that God has said you and I have a destination beyond this place. And so when hard times come, we forget that God has for us a plan for our life, that he intends to get us through this life, and not just through this life, but from this life until eternity. So, knowing that, we need to understand that God's providence, or the real root behind that word, God's provision, providing for you and I, is what you and I need to learn to trust. And here's what is a confession of my own life, and I can tell you this, what feels like thousands of times, although I might be exaggerating. There seems like thousands of times I've said, I will trust, only to find myself questioning when I face hard times. Now, I think I question less, but I'll say that, and tomorrow it'll be horrible, and I'll question more than ever. So here's the reason why I'm telling you this. Your struggle, your ups, your downs does not change the provisions of God. It does not change the fact that God is here walking with you if you are a follower of Jesus Christ through the work of his Holy Spirit living inside of you, and he has not left you and he has not forsaken you. Through his provision, he has provided you and I the life we have, and then the hope we have beyond this life, because this life is short. This past week saddened my heart. Buried a friend. I oftentimes get to go to funerals, or I attend funerals, or I speak at funerals, but this past week was a tougher one. I buried a close friend of mine, and it's just hard when you see someone go through some of the things you see your friends and family go through, and you wonder, why, God, why this person or why that person? We all struggle with that, but what we need to understand is that God has made a way for you and I. Which brings me to the next thing I want to kind of talk about real quick, and I think it's important for us to comprehend this. This is so hard, but so true. God works in all things. God works in all things. And what that means to you and I is this. There is nothing, and I mean nothing. There is not bankruptcies. There is not illnesses, cancer. There is not bad diagnosis. There are not accidents which have caused horrific deaths. None of these things have escaped God's hands and God's sight. He knows, and he is working in all of those things, which is hard for you and I to understand because our mind is limited. Isaiah tells us that our mind is not his mind and our ways are not his ways in Isaiah 55. And so although I cannot say I like everything God allows to happen, I can say this, that whether I believe it or not, God is still at work upstream in my life, and his ways are higher than mine, and his thoughts and his wisdom are much higher than mine. So when I look at the circumstances I face, I need to recognize, and you need to recognize, that God is at work in all things, good and bad. As a matter of fact, that verse that people quote all the time, and leave out the one before and one after. So I'm going to read Romans 8:27 through 29. Listen to it. He knows us far better than we know ourselves. That's why we can be so sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is worked into something good. God knew what he was doing from the very beginning. He decided from the outset to shape the lives of those who love him along the same lines as the life of his son. Now you say, well, that doesn't sound like the verse I remember. Well, that's from the Message. And it's sort of a paraphrase. The Message is a paraphrase. And so what he's saying is that he is working out the details in our lives each and every moment when we are in a position where we're in a love relationship with him, even if we don't feel the love. And so when God is working upstream, he is working for your growth and for my growth. When God is working in our lives in ways we can't even begin to see, he is actually working for the growth of our faith in him and for our trust in him. And he's working to grow us into a better follower of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't like that, but it doesn't change the truth of it. I don't like that, but it doesn't change the reality that God knows exactly how to operate in our lives in a way that makes us closer to him, even when we don't feel close. So God is working upstream for your growth. And then the next thing is that when we're in that position, you and I need to learn to trust when we can't see. You and I need to learn to trust when we can't see. Listen, this is probably the most difficult thing I've probably ever tried to do and fail at. But I'd like to say, and I hope I'm not sounding like I'm just making excuses, but I'm telling you, I think I do it better than I used to, even though I don't do it 100%. I think I trust God more than I used to, even though I don't do it 100%. And there are times I wonder, do I trust him at all? I mean, it's just a struggle. And if you're there, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not there, you'll be there. You see, there's only basically 3 seasons in life. Okay? There's only 3 things that are happening in life at any given season of your life. The first thing is you're headed into a storm. Okay? Which means you're not in a struggle right now, but sooner or later you will be. Your storms may be more or less than others, but needless to say, you're headed into a storm. Secondly, some of us are in a storm. That's the second thing that happens in the seasons of life, is that we're either on our way into a storm or we're actually in the storm. Or the third thing that happens is that we're on our way out of a storm. And we're in that place where we begin to see the relief we need in the middle of the circumstances. So you and I need to learn to trust when we can't see God's hands. In John chapter 20, Jesus talking to someone you're very familiar with, known as Doubting Thomas, he says, "My Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. And what he's talking about is he saw the marks in Jesus' body and he decided he was going to trust. This is what Jesus says back to him. "You believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." So you and I, we need to learn to believe even though we can't see. Something else that is difficult about trusting God when he is working upstream, but is so important for you and I to recognize and to practice. And that is, you and I need to let go of what we can't control anyway. You see, I can't control cancer. I wish I could. If I could have controlled cancer, I would have stopped the cancer in my friend's life. That's how it works. If I could stop something, if I could control something, I would do it. I would stop the hurts that my family feels from time to time when they're sick or when there's struggle or when there's conflict. I would take that entirely away if I could control life. But I can't control life. Not only can I control life, but I can't control what other people choose. And so the only way you're really going to work in your life and really trust is when you let go of the things you can't control. When you let go of the people you can't control, when you let go of the reality that you don't have control, then you can begin to trust that upstream God is at work. And then so powerfully is this: in your pain, you can't see the big picture, but there is a bigger picture going on. But in your pain, you have struggle. So we need to recognize that our pain is part of a bigger picture, that God is working out something in our life. In Romans chapter 8, verse 18, Paul writes these words, "Yet what we suffer is nothing compared to the glory he will reveal to us later." Now, you say, well, I don't really get that verse. Well, let me see if I can give you a quick illustration about that verse. So, here we go. Imagine if you owed $1 million. Oh my goodness, you go, I don't have $1 million, Bill. Listen, I don't even have enough money if I owed a few $1,000s to just go pay that off. But imagine that if I owed $1 million, it would take everything inside of me and my trust of God, my struggle, my discouragement, all those things would be on a high alert. Then imagine someone shows up with $100 million. And they give me that $100 million, and all of a sudden you hear me whining about the $1 million I owe. And you say to me, "Bill, just take $1 million, 1/100th of what you were just given, and pay that off and shut up." Well, that's a little harsh, I get it. But listen, God is saying to you, you're going through the hard times, but there is not any suffering here that is even close percentage-wise to the amount of glory that you're going to have in heaven. So try to understand you're already rich, that this is only a small, small, small amount compared to the glory you're going to see when you leave this life. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has ever imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. That's what Paul wrote to the church at Corinth. So let's get personal as we close this morning, okay? If you're hurting right now, you possibly think that this isn't going to work for you. In other words, "Bill, I can't believe that he's working upstream. I just can't handle it." I understand. Listen, I have been hurting. Matter of fact, I could fall into a hole tomorrow and forget all that I'm teaching for a little while because it's easy for me to do that. My emotional state can get so deep and dark sometimes. But it doesn't mean that in the middle of your hurt, God's not working. And if for some reason right now you're not hurting, oh my goodness, dear friend, be careful, because you are ripe for the judgmentalism that looks down on someone who cannot believe God is working. And so you just look and say, well, God works in your life, doesn't he? Works in my life. Why can't you just believe like I believe? Listen, arrogance comes in easy seasons. Be careful, be aware. The judgmentalism you have may be a place in which that Satan can work in your life, and like Job's friends, can discourage those you're trying to encourage. And then I remind you to always understand in your circumstance, no matter what it is, God is always at work upstream. He knows exactly what he's doing. He knows exactly why he's doing it, and he is working upstream in your life. So be encouraged today as much as you can. Text me, email me, message me on Facebook. Let me know how I can pray for you if you're going through a difficult season, so that we can begin to encourage you as well. All right? Hey, thanks for your time today. As we close up, let's go back to the question of the hour, the toughest question ever asked. And now you're chuckling again that Bill's crazy. When you eat peanut butter and jelly sandwich, when you eat PBJ, what's your favorite flavor of jelly? And is it the same flavor you like most when eating toast? I had someone comment earlier that they eat apple butter. I appreciate that. And I'll let you in on a squeaky that it's just like jelly. It's just not jelly, okay? So there we go. Toughest question I've ever asked. What's your PBJ jelly choice, and is it the same as your toast choice? All right? Hey, come back next week and let's talk again. It's going to be the what I call a one-hit wonder, and basically I'm going to talk about the Confessions of a Short Chaplain. I've done these a few different times. Next week we're going to talk about the Confessions of a Short Chaplain. I want to talk to you about some things that I can confess to you as we spend time together learning to grow and learning to go for our Savior. All right? So come back. Let's talk about it next week on Friday morning, and let's spend some time together on Foundations, all right? Make sure to tune in. Make sure to share Foundations with your family and friends as we spend time together. Make sure you share it on your social media. Share it through email. Let your family and friends know when you're watching, or maybe watch together at 8:30 a.m. every Friday morning, all right? See you next week. Appreciate you. Appreciate all your encouragement. Appreciate everything you do. Could not do what we do without you, no matter who it is. And I appreciate you so much today. So God bless. Have an amazing Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. All right? And y'all take care now.